Good evening and good day to you all and everyone. It is the case we are back once again for the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5 as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform known only as iRacing, available on PC, and today marks round 3 of the 13 round season. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the end of the first quarter of the championship, and well, by no means are things slacking, or indeed the momentum is not lacking. It's only building more and more as the series continues tonight with the return to another feature race round, or what we like to refer to as the Alpha Challenge, while drivers will be going racing over a single race. But not to get ahead of ourselves, of course, let's take you through the schedule for tonight at the Fuji Speedway circuit here in Japan. Our schedule is as follows: times in British Summer Time, that's BST or UTC +1. In approximately 14 minutes time, we'll be getting underway with the qualifying session, 15 minutes in length to determine our grid order for our one and only race tonight, and that race will immediately follow at approximately 8 o'clock this evening, and that will be the feature race, 60 minutes in length, the Alpha Challenge with specific rules and regulations which we'll take you through. But it is the case our drivers will not just need to be the fastest out of the circuit over a single lap if they want to win, they'll also need to master the art, keeping it consistent, and also knowing when to pit, to take that all-important pit stop to get them to the end of the race, and also make sure they come home with the maximum possible points. In the commentary booth, you have myself, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and today's broadcast is, as always, a post-round broadcast. It is the case the race in action itself occurred on Monday the 25th of July, so at the very start of the week, whereas the case we're bringing you all the race in action as if it were live this Friday the 29th of July 2022. So as a result, if you are tuning in tonight and you did take part in this race, if you're one of our many drivers out of the circuit, and I do believe we have 25 drivers that are planning to take to the grid tonight, it is the case we do ask you, of course, in the chat, whether it be on the Twitch or YouTube chat, to not have any spoilers revealed, indeed keep it quiet. And it is the case that to those of you tuning in who do not participate in this championship, well, much like myself, you're going into the unknown. I, as your host and commentator, do not know what happens, whether it be in this practice session, whether it be in qualifying, or indeed in the race, like you guys, and therefore it's all raw, it's completely fresh, and after the opening 2 rounds have provided us with so much entertainment, drama, you name it, it can only continue here tonight at Fuji. And well, indeed, what a circuit to go racing at. And well, it's a circuit that is known for one thing: it's known for its incredibly long start-finish straight, but it's also known for also being the crowning jewel in some drivers' championships in the real world, most notably, of course, as immortalised in the movie Rush, the 1976 Formula 1 Championship, which saw James Hunt take the championship crown by a single point ahead of his main rival Niki Lauda in absolutely ferocious and treacherous conditions. We're not quite at the end of the championship, nor are we in absolutely torrential downpour conditions. Indeed, the rain not modelled in iRacing yet, but you can imagine that today could be a stepping stone to some championship crowns in both our Alpha and Delta classes. But on the way to the end of the championship, of course, as we said, we are not quite a quarter of the way through. After tonight, we will arguably be a quarter way there, and it is the case we are at Fuji, having been preceded by 2 visits to 2 venues in the United States of America. Last time out, of course, it was the Laguna Seca Raceway, or the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, as it's known more formally, and that was back last week in the state of California, Monterey County, and before that we were at Belle Isle in Detroit, of course, for the season opener. Indeed, 2 very different styles of racing, where Belle Isle was a feature race located within a street circuit, Laguna Seca a number of sprint races, our first sprint round, if you will, which was all about trying to get ahead of your foes as quickly as possible and in maintaining that position at a circuit where it's quite difficult to overtake, but in touring cars it really opened up the proceedings. Today, of course, we're at the Fuji Speedway, and as you can see from the blue line there, we are having an Alpha Challenge or a feature race round, and after today we'll head to a sprint round at Alton Park, and the race itself will take place on the 1st of August, and that will be at the British venue, before we then continue to make our way across continental Europe with the Italian circuit of Monza for a feature race as of the 8th of August, then the sprint races at the Red Bull Ring in Austria on the 15th of August, and then we head back to Italy for the Autodromo Dino Ferrari, or Imola as it's known in short, on the 22nd of August, before returning to the United Kingdom for our last visit to the United Kingdom, and indeed our last visit to a European venue, and that will be at Donington Park on the 29th of August, and then at the start of September, particularly the 5th of September, the series wraps up its first half of the season, if you will, at Interlagos, of the South American circuit, particularly in Brazil, at a circuit which is definitely one that's known to cause drama in a championship campaign. There's no doubt about that. And then we take a week's break. The series will then return for its second half come the 19th of September at Motorsport at the Canadian Time Motorsports Park as it's known in full. And then we'll be having 3 final rounds, all based in the United States of America, where the Sprint Challenge at Motorsport will be followed up by 2 feature race rounds or 2 Alpha Challenge rounds at Mid-Ohio and then Watkins Glen, and then the season finale, the special finale at Road Atlanta. 10th of October is when the racing will all occur. We'll be bringing it as a post-round broadcast late on in the week, and it is the case that we bring the curtain down on the championship at the ultimate roller coaster ride in the United States. But before we get then indeed all the way through that calendar, let's focus more on where we are tonight, and that is at the Fuji Speedway in the Oyama area, the Sento district of the Shizuoka prefecture of Japan. It is the case that this circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided to us here by simracingwiki.com, in fact I think it may have been taken from wikipedia.org, that's a bit of a misquote there on our source, but regardless, it is the case that this circuit is not just known for its long start finish straight, that is its main feature that it's renowned for, but also for the fact that it has a variety of 16 corners which see the lap split into 2 distinct halves. The first half of the lap is focused on sweeping corners and maintaining average apex speed, with the fact that after the first hairpin, or what is literally known as first corner, turn number 1, we have the run through turn number 2, the kink of 2, down towards Coca-Cola turn number 3, and then we have the run through the double right apex of 100R that's made up of turns 4 and 5 before the head into the second hairpin corner, if you will, known as hairpin at turns 6 and 7. Our drivers will then make their way flat out through turns 8, 9 and 10, all the way down through 300R into the Dunlop hairpin, the third and final hairpin corner on the circuit, with Dunlop being followed up by the chicane. We have the full chicane there at turns 11 and 12, and it's the run through the final sector, and the body language of the circuit changes after the Dunlop hairpin in the fact that now it's all about rotating the car as quickly as possible through the corner and getting back on the throttle as soon as possible. There's a distinct change where it's less about the sweepers and more about just having the confidence to push the car through corner apex, and we'll see that straight away at the 13th corner, literally turn number 13, and through nets of turn 14 and 15, where it's the uphill left-hand right-angle corner, which will see our drivers have to climb their way over a blind apex before the run up into turn number 16. Panasonic corner, a corner which is very, very unique in the fact it has at least 3 different racing lines you can take as a driver. There's a very tight line if you want to go on the offensive, there's a very wide line if you want to focus on straight line speed down the start-finish straight, or there's the natural racing line, which is a hybrid of the 2 through the middle, and it is the case we could see 3 or even 4 wide into the final corner, and we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. And that is then the end of all the corners, and then it's the run down the start finish straight to the finish line, of course, on the final lap. But over the course of each lap, expect plenty of draft action, indeed slipstream action, all the way down the start finish straight. One of the longest in road racing in the world as it currently stands. Indeed, it's the case that that straight, similar to the extended straight of Circuit Paul Ricard in France when the chicanes are not deployed, but the start finish straight here is definitely going to see a lot of frantic action, and we should see it over the entirety of the lap in these touring car class, we can say, and don't try and say that too rapidly on a Friday afternoon as I tried, you may just get it wrong. But with that, we now look to our rules, and it is the case in terms of our setups for tonight. Our car fuel loads have been restricted to 43 litres for this round. A little bit of extra fuel has gone in the cars to ensure that they have the right balance of fuel, where that 43 litres will not enable them to get to the end of the race unscaled on fuel capacity. They will need to come into the pits, and indeed you can see that here with a specific Alpha race rule set. There's a mandatory pit stop where our drivers must take on fuel, but changing tyres is entirely optional. Whether our drivers manage their tyres or not, it's up to them in terms of can they get the tyres to the end of the race. Although we have typically seen that most drivers do get the tyres to run all the distance, it's more about the fuel. And a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 9 or more instant points, and shall be disqualified from the race evening if they accumulate 16 instant points in total. There are also bonus points available, as always. 1 point for pole position, that's the overall pole position, not in class, but the overall on that grid of 25 today. 1 point for the fastest lap in the race. There's also 1 point for the Sublime Finesse Award, which is the fewest instants over the round, so the driver with the lowest number of instant points racked up. There's also a point for leading a lap, and there's a point for the Naked Aggression Award, which is the most overtakes over the round. But with that, that's enough rules and regulations. I know what you're all here for, and that is to see the race in action indeed, as our drivers continue to get themselves set in this final warm-up or practice session, if you will. It is the case we do look circuit side, and we can see here David Bauer making his way through turn number 1 and down into 2 in the Hyundai Elantra, and as he rolls his way on through here, does the Alpha driver. It is the case. He's currently P7 in the final timing standings here in the practice session, and we can see it is the case from P1, which is owned up by Micah Hendricks, all the way down to Bauer in P7. It's a second that separates the top 7 there, which is absolutely brilliant, although Hendricks seems to be in a little bit of a world of his own. and the fact there's a 3.5 tenths advantage. But again, in this final practice session, a lot of the time drivers do try to hold a little bit of the pace back rather than reveal their true colours. That's what qualifying is for, and qualifying is not too far away. Indeed, our drivers have had the last almost 4 hours to practice in the build-up to going qualifying. It is the case that whilst our drivers are encouraged to practice throughout the week in the build-up to the racing, a large practice session is put on for the purposes of preceding qualifying and the race to make sure everybody's able to join it, able to get warmed up, and then we have the fantastic racing action, of course. But as we do wait here with only 4.5 minutes remaining, it is the case we say hello in the respective chats, whether it's in YouTube or Twitch, as follows. We say hello firstly to John Lauzon in the YouTube chat there, saying looking forward to seeing this one, and we're very happy to see you there, John, tuning on in. And we have Fernando Takahashi we say hello to, saying great broadcast. Well, we appreciate it, Fernando, but more importantly, your question, when do these races happen? Well, we have just gone through the schedule there, but I can see that John Lauzon has clarified that the races do happen on Monday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, that's PST, or 10 o'clock in the evening Eastern Standard Time, if my American time zones are correct. I may be a little bit shaky on those, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the case. If anybody is tuning in right now and you are thinking about potentially getting involved, or you're thinking, how can I get out on the circuit in these touring car racing class cars, the TCR class cars, do get in touch with John in the YouTube chat. Alternatively, do check out Alpha Touring Change, and we'll give you all the information you need with regards to checking out Alpha Touring Change later on in tonight's program, so that way you can potentially sign up, whether it's for season 5, alternatively a future season. Indeed, this championship now into its 5th season, and it's only getting stronger season after season. And it is the case this season, of course, has seen the introduction of the Delta class. Well, what do we mean by the Delta class? You can see on the timing tower on the left hand side of your screen, we have blue stripes against some drivers' names, whereby between their position number in this final practice session. So if we're looking at Michael McLeod right now, the privateer is in 9th position in this practice session, as you can see, and then between his name and that 9th position, we do have a blue stripe. Blue stripe drivers are signified as alpha drivers, or if you will, you could simplify it to say they are pro class drivers. They are our faster drivers here, whereas it is the case if we look to someone like Eric Stetzer, for example, the Honda Civic Type R driver here rolling his way through turn number 15. It is the case you can see their P15 in this practice session right now, and he has a purple pink slash against his name, and that means he's part of our Delta class, or the equivalent would be a Pro-Am class, whereby these are some of our less experienced drivers who are being given the opportunity to go racing within their own class. But do keep in mind, it's not the case that they are awarded their own separate class points. So what does that mean in practice? If one of our Delta drivers takes the overall win in a race, they will be given the overall win points. Meanwhile, if they finish second, and then they are the leader of their class, of course, crossing that line, they still take the 2nd place overall points home in the championship. They do not get rewarded for points within their own class. That is the case that our overall drivers championship, indeed our team's championship, are all simplified to stick to a single point system for all of our drivers who take to the circuit. So what that also means for our Delta class drivers is they're not just in a battle with their own class, they're battling with the alphas, and if they can beat some alpha drivers for positions, then all the better for them. And the one driver, of course, you need to keep your eyes on about that as he makes his way out of the pit lane right now is Connor Acatella, the number 55 driver here, as he heads on out in the Hyundai Veloster here. He has been the driver to watch in the Delta class, after it was Wiley Cox who took all the camera time, indeed, at what was Belle Isle in Detroit, with what was an absolutely brilliant drive from start to finish. It was the case Wiley Cox taking the win. Then last time out at Laguna Seca, it was Acatella who was not just taking the wins in his class, but was also pushing on each and every time and taking the fight left, right and centre to his alpha class peers, indeed picking up some good points on the board, and that's giving him a lot of momentum. And the question will really be tonight between Acatella and Wiley Cox, who out of the two of them here will be able to find that momentum, because what we've seen so far is that Acatella seems to be the stronger sprint driver. Meanwhile, Wiley Cox is parked in the pit lane. I think it's got a slight issue with his livery there. It's a glitch in our replay. It will load in when we go into qualifying, but Wiley Cox really has been the feature race driver based on round number 1. But of course, we've only had one round of each type of racing session, so it's not as though we really have too much data to go by. But also another driver to watch out for, Robert Abrams there, parked up in the pit lane right now for Yellow Flag Motorsports. Really the dominant force has the American been over the course of the first 2 rounds overall in the championship, leading the way in both rounds. And can he continue that tonight, or will we see a shake-up in the order? Now, why could Fuji potentially present a shake-up in the order? Well, we'll talk more about the circuit, indeed the lap over the course of the qualifying session, but as we talked about previously already about Fuji Speedway, this is a circuit whereby you've got a very long start-finish straight, which is all about the drag race down towards turn number 1, but you've also got a circuit that's split into those two halves of sweepers in the first half and then a much more technical, lower speed section in the second half of the lap. And what that effectively means is our drivers need to try and gap one another, alternatively gain on one another in the run around the circuit before they get to that start-finish straight. And if they can create gaps, alternatively close the gap down, then opportunities arise or positions are kept. If they can't clear their way approximately a whole second or even 1.5 seconds from the driver ahead of them or behind them, then it is the case the slipstream really takes the toll. But now as we make our way into this qualifying session, it is the case. Now all of our drivers will have 15 minutes to put in their qualifying times, and let's wait and see how it all plays on out here as we do look to our drivers making their way out of the pit lane. And it is a lot of misters come across the circuit. Indeed, it's not the case that we put a filter on. It's more of the situation right now whereby we seem to have very low-lying cloud. But to keep in mind, of course, when we say low-lying cloud here, where it's quite a high-altitude circuit, given the fact that the Fuji Speedway, as some of you who are a bit more geographically inclined may be aware, this circuit is located in the foothills of or the foothills, we should really say, of Mount Fuji in Japan, and therefore it is the case the cloud can come quite low onto the circuit and create this mist effect, which you're seeing right now as all of our drivers make their way out onto the circuit here and get themselves warmed up in this qualifying session now, putting in their initial warm-up laps before they make their way down the start-finish straight to go on to their first flying laps. As we see there, David Bauer just yielding towards Matt Shepka. Shepka rolled his way on through and past through in turns 4 and 5. As he makes his way into the hairpin here at turn number 6. It is the case in terms of the run of form we're expecting. Well, we are expecting the Hyundai Elantras to be the strong cars again. Indeed, the Hyundai Elantra seem to have been the go-to car over the course of the racing so far, but do not count out the other cars in the touring car racing class, of course, where it's the Honda Civic Type R being piloted by Shepka right now as he makes his way down into the Dunlop hairpin. Alternatively, the Audi RS3s, although we don't have any Audi RS3s out on the circuit today, unfortunately, they haven't come here, and I do suspect that may be the case. They haven't been available at drivers in the RS3, but we do have some Hyundai Velosters, and well, Micah Hendricks in particular, as he makes his way on out. It is the case that Hendricks will be building on up as he rolls his way down and around, and that Hyundai Veloster, very punchy car coming out of course. You can get it pointed, it can do very well indeed. But we do look from Hendricks here to Shepka as he makes his way out of the final corner, starts heading his way down the start-finish straight here, and we get ready to take you around for the first flying lap of this qualifying session. Now it's going to feel as though this straight goes on for an eternity, and indeed with that mist it does give that perception as though it's a never-ending straight here, but I can tell you it does end at some point as he makes his way up to 6th gear. It's a long run down, and a lot of our drivers will have changed the gearbox around in order to try and get as much top speed down here, but he'll be looking to his left for his brake marker and looking for that 100 metre ball, braking about 115 metres, heavy on the brakes, head down to 2nd gear, rolling the car through the turn 1 apex, and now making his way, using the exit curve in there to run the car a bit wide, down through the Kinker 2 and up towards 3, getting ready to head into turn 3 in 5th gear and braking at about 60 metres from the corner, down 1 gear to 4th gear, trail braking over the apex, letting the car flowing through before getting back on the throttle and keeping the car nice and tight to the apex there of turn 4, letting the car roll out to a degree before bringing it back to the apex of 5, and as he heads up the hill now into turn number 6, into the hairpin, braking at the 50 metre board. A deceptive hairpin this one. The 50 metre board sounds as though it's very close to the corner, but the corner drops away, and you saw that there in the fact that Shepka just needed to tap the brakes and then roll the car through under braking, and as he makes his way through 300R, through turns 8 and 9 and down towards 10, he'll be braking underneath the Dunlop billboard there, coming all the way down to 1st gear, arguably the slice corner of the circuit, and as he makes his way through the chicane of 11 and 12, he'll straight line his way across the apex curve of 12 and head up towards turn number 13, and as he rolls his way through the left-hander here, it is the case that Shepka now heads up towards turn 14, goes to the kink of 14, into 15 here, into next bend, and as he rolls his way through, you can see that summit-style apex curve there where he's got to drive uphill over the curve and then bring the car immediately back over to left as he prepares to turn number 16 here through the Panasonic corner, gets a nice line through, and now using the runoff area, then you'll notice the sausage curves, those yellow raised curves on the exit curve in the turn number 16. Our drivers have been reporting in the practice sessions when they run 1 or 2 wheels over, the left-hand side wheels, they're not too bad to run over, but if they go over them, start to bring the right-hand side wheels closer and closer, the car can be severely upset. As we see Shepka crossing the line there with a 49.428 as our drivers continue to make their way around in this qualifying session. But a lovely lap there from Matt Shepka, and indeed we've got plenty more to come in this session. But as we look from Shepka to one of our Delta drivers, we look to Jesse Bodas here as he heads his way out of the final corner. Indeed, everybody right now trying to set personal best early on in this qualifying session, and it is the case. You'll see on that circuit map in the top right corner of your screen. Now, I think the body language of the qualifying session will change as well, in the fact that drivers initially may not be too worried about finding the slipstream down the start-finish straight, but later on it may be the case we'll see some teams try to work as groups in order to be able to get a little bit more time for one or two drivers in the qualifying lap by slipstreaming their way down towards the checkered flag line or the timeline, however you want to phrase it. But in return, of course, the rest of the lap, particularly the second half of the lap, you don't really want to be in the tow, because the dirty air of the driver in front of you can really upset the aero balance of the car. And whilst these touring cars are quite boxy in terms, they're not the most aerodynamically efficient cars, every little helps. And of course they do have that massive rear wing on the back of them to help settle the rear of the car down, as Bodas making his way around right now, and as he does, heading up through 100R and up towards the hairpin, currently P20, P5 within his class. As we look from him to Francois Schink, and right now Francois Schink running in P2 in the overall championship. It is the case that Schink doing very well so far, and really the one driver who's been able to keep what is Abrams are honest over the course of the championship to date in the opening two rounds. Although, to be fair, it is the case that Robert Abrams has been putting in some very strong performances here. And the question will be, of course, with regards to our drivers, in terms of the setups they're using, given the length of the race, it's only the one race that's an hour long, will they be using a setup that are more focused on one-lap pace, alternatively consistency? It is the case that Fuji in qualifying is a very different beast from compared to where it is in race conditions. In qualifying, of course, it's all about getting that ultimate lap, and if you can get the draft as well to aid you in securing the ultimate lap, all the better. Whereas in the race, some drivers will be looking to try and make an early breakaway, others will be looking to stay with the pack, potentially fuel save with that mandatory fuel pit stop, of course, and that will be playing on the factor of every driver's mind here, because the dynamic, if they can't break away and they set the car for breaking away, that can come back to haunt them in the pits in terms of not being able to jump drivers in the pits but losing places when they got to put extra fuel in. But we can see Schink here coming on down with John Lauzon side by side with the two teammates as they make their way across the line for Beaver Buzz Racing. And as they head on down right now, I think Schink here will be taking the lead position of the two as Lauzon goes on the brakes a little bit early and Schink tucks his way into turn number one. And the nice thing, of course, about these touring class cars is the fact, because they're all front engine, front wheel drive with the center mass located as far forward as possible with the engine, plus the fact the front wheels do all the hard work, both the power deployment and also the turning. That means we'll see for a lot of these sweepers, the drivers will take very aggressive lines into them. Normally, if you look at, say, GT3 class cars, where it's the case that the drive is at the rear of the car, so to the rear wheels, and the engine's either in the front or the rear, it is the case the cars normally take more sweeping approaches to these corners, where we'll see them take wide lines in and wide lines out. Here will be the case we may see some very aggressive lines into corner apex to get on the power as soon as possible, and we did see that, of course, with Shepka's lap heading through at 100R, and we're also seeing it as our drivers make their way through that final sector. And speaking of that final sector, we can see right now that he's a long way away from him. Here's Adrian Fedorowski as he makes his way down the round, and as he heads all the way down towards turn number 3. Well, Fedorowski right now looking as though he needs to find some more time on the board there, as we do look at what is we look to the lap times that have currently been set, and right now Micah Hendricks stands at the top of the board with what is a 47.762, and indeed the best part of what is 600ths faster than Francois Schink. And well, as I try to make the way on the round at this point with just over half the qualifying session complete, just under half of it remaining, well, Fedorowski's got a lot to do here with a time that is 2.7 seconds off of the best, and indeed he is currently a whole 10th off of Travis Hoare, one of his rivals. And we can see here it is the case that Hoare making his way out of the hairpin to turn 6 and 7 and down through 8, 9 and 10, and as he makes his way down towards turn number 10 here in the little Veloster that could, here's the case that the Hyundai driver looking compact right now, but definitely a bit of Daniel Sedino in the fact that Sedino is the best part of 2 attempts ahead of him. That is quite a gap when you talk about qualifying laps here at Fuji. Normally it is the case you can pull a 10th over a driver, that's a good amount, but then 2 attempts is a lot more, and indeed that's some time that's got to be found. But to be fair, the second half of the lap is where a lot of time can be found, a lot of time can be made or lost if you don't nail the apex. As you can see there, Hoare from the exterior camera really trying to get the car in early into that apex and next bend at turn 15. 15 in order to be able to get on that power and charge up the hill, but taking a very tight entry line there into turn 16. And conversely with turn 16, the fact that the corner is essentially over a bump, it is the case you actually want to take a little bit of a wider entry line just simply to open up the corner and also avoid the car being knocked too far forward in terms of being forced to understeer off the circuit. But Jorge comes down to the timeline, and as he does, well, not improving at this time around. Indeed, here's the case of losing some time there, and I think just that final section in particular really costing him as Jorge Zuniga, we should say, makes his way across the line and goes a P8 there, and it is the case that 6/10 faster than him is Hendricks, but he's also the best part of 600ths faster than our leading Delta driver, O'Connor Acatella, as Acatella right now really delivering on the stage here once again. And indeed, that timing tower is no lie right now. Acatella is the best part of 7 places clear from his next best place rival within the Delta class, and that is Wiley Cox. And Delta between the two of them in terms of lap times is 9/10 of a second. But we focus here on Zuniga, and it is the case that as he makes his way out of turn 6 and 7 here, well, he's a debutant in this season. It is the case that he's a regular driver in previous seasons of the AlphaTauri Challenge, but he's back for more in season 5 as of this round, and we do wish him all the best of luck on his return to the series as running in the Hyundai Elantra. And of course, the Elantra, a very popular car in this series, and really right now can arguably on iRacing, given the current balance of performance, one of, if not the strongest of the touring car racing class cars overall, particularly when open setups are concerned. As we see there, Zuniga going a bit deep, coming out of 13, he parks up immediately, he'll be jumping to the pits. But we look back to Matt Shepka here, who makes his way through 11 and 12 and up towards 13, and as he does, it is the case right now, the number 490 driver still got a lot of time to find, currently P12 and 1.1 seconds off of Hendricks. But speaking of Micah Hendricks, here he is in the Veloster, making his way down towards turn number 10 right now, and does seem to be doing very well, it must be said, in the Lego Brickmobile. And I have been hearing rumours down the paddock that livery is going to change for the next round at Alton Park. It is the case we're going to be saying goodbye to the Lego, and indeed, well, I think a number of drivers will be bricking it as to what livery he'll be bringing in instead. Will it be Jupo? Will it be a Connect? Joking aside, however, it is the case one of the more colourful liveries on the grid. That's not to say the other drivers' liveries are not too colourful, but as he makes his way through turn 15 and up towards 16, right now Hendricks getting ready to go onto a lap, and that's good because we're getting ready to ride on board with him as he takes us around for another flying lap of the Fuji Speedway. As he makes his way down the start-finish straight here, the difference we're going to see between the Veloster versus the Civic Type R that we previously rode on board with is the fact that you'll notice how the Veloster will be a little bit more punchy in the gearbox coming out of the corners, and also on top of that, it's not quite as strong on the brakes, so we may see the braking distances increase slightly. But as he makes his way down towards turn number 1 here, looking to the left-hand side, looking for that 100 metre ball, braking at about 120 metres there, and rolling the car through and taking a huge amount of apex curve. They're just missing the bollard, and as he makes his way out to turn 1 and through 2, now heading down towards turn number 3, in towards Coca-Cola Bend, and as he looks to his right here at that 50 metre board, how late will he go? He goes at 55 metres, oh good lord, right on the apex, and you can see right on the limits, the car rolls out into the V-shaped exit curve, and keeping it very tight there to the entrance of turn number 4, and returning immediately to the apex of 5, and using apex curve to rotate the car through, before breaking his way down into turn number 6 here, riding over the sleeping policeman of the turn 6 apex curve, heading through 7, and this has been a very aggressive but smooth lap so far as he makes his way through the kink of 8, through the kink of 9 very shortly. Now it's all about nailing those apex rotations as he breaks his way at the 100 metre board down into Dunlop hairpin. Coming all the way down to the slice corner circuit, first gear there, you see the car trying to drift away from him, but he battles it. He understeers wide there coming out of 11, slightly being caught off, but he brings the car back together just about as he rolls his way through the 13th corner. Here's the case, he's going to use plenty of apex there of turn number 14 to bring the car up to next bend, and as he heads for a left-hander here, just balances it in the middle of the road, exits on out, and now brings the car over to the left for turn number 16, brakes nice and late. There's no real brake mark here, you have to do this by rhythm and feel, and as he makes his way through the apex, gets on the power nice and early. This is a nice lap from Hendricks, and as he heads on down, I think they're just hitting the rev limiter very slightly. We heard the gearbox go a bit quiet, so here's the case that Hendricks, I think, is pushing a bit too hard. It may have cost him slightly coming to the line. Well, his previous best of 47.762, he crossed the line this time at 48.233, where his case that may have been half a second slower than his previous best, but Hendricks definitely flying and showing what that Veloster can do around here. But meanwhile, we must look from our overall provisional pole sitter to Logan Mckinsey right now, and McKinsey Mckinsey finds himself here in a little bit of a troublesome situation in the fact that he has a Honda Civic going quite slowly on the inside line there, but it's backing out, so he won't have to worry too much. But he does have in front of him there one of our other drivers, and that's the number 38 car, unless I'm very much mistaken, of Aaron Lahr. And well, Aaron Lahr has had a very difficult season so far, it must be said, and he'll be hoping for some luck today. Well, he's not having any luck right now. He's P19 in this qualifying session with a minute to go, and indeed Aaron Lahr really just not able to hook it up here by looks of things in qualifying. I think the story of his season so far has been the case. He's just had misfortune after misfortune, and he'll be looking to try and find some compensation here. It's not going to come in qualifying, it's going to come in the race if it's going to appear. But to be fair, one of the biggest things we actually haven't talked about yet, keep in mind, we've got a long run from the standing start down towards turn number 1. And what is turn number 1? It's a heavy braking zone followed by a hairpin. Yes, that's right. It could be the case. We could be seeing 2, 3, 4 wide into a hairpin, which, regardless of the class, indeed Super GT races here on a regular basis, year in, year out. It is the case that opening a lap and indeed the run to the hairpin can be very, very dramatic, and we could expect some drama here today in the AlphaTauri Challenge. But right now, most of our drivers coming to the end of their qualifying laps, and as they do, the checkered flag comes on out to this qualifying session. 15 minutes is complete. Now all of our drivers will be given the opportunity to finish their final laps. And can anybody else improve? That is the big question that we're asking right now as they head on down. We have just had Micah Hendricks cross the line, and in fact Hendricks improving a little bit further by looks of things in terms of that pole time. Meanwhile, it is the case that Aaron Lahr heading on down here after benefiting from the tow to a degree of what's Logan Mckinsey, as Mckinsey makes his way into the pits, but Lahr heads on down, and it's not an improvement for Aaron Lahr. Meanwhile, a bit further back, we've got August Blondell making his way through where's the chicane and heading up towards turn number 13. Running his way through the right hander here is the Blue Flag Motorsports driver in the Hyundai Elantra, one of our very last drivers to cross that timeline. In fact, I think he will be the second to last driver. The only other driver out there will be Adrian Fredorowski, who is making his way into the Dunlop hairpin chicane sequence at this time. But as we look to Blondell making his way out of the final corner here, he's currently P17, 1.7 seconds off of that pole lap. Can he get any higher, or will it be the case that he stays where he is? He makes his way down. This will be P3 in the Delta class if he doesn't improve, which isn't a bad achievement. It's close to Wiley Cox, missing out by only 1.5 tenths, but as he crosses the line, it is the case he does improve, a 49.476, and that puts him just a little bit closer, does Gus Blondell, and well, a good lap done by him in the end, improving by 100th. Meanwhile, we do have Fredowski here, the last driver to complete a lap, as he heads on down the start-finish straight, and as he comes on down, he's weaving from side to side. I think he feels as though this is not an improving lap, and he's just going to finish it, and it is the case he'll be starting P23 in the end, and it's Spencer Cockayne who'll start last, having not set a time. Meanwhile, it is Micah Hendricks who takes pole position here overall in this qualifying session at the Fuji Speedway in emphatic fashion in the end, by what is 600ths over Francois Schenck, and the two of them ahead of the rest of the field by 2 tenths to Logan Mckinsey in P3. But that is qualifying, ladies and gentlemen, and now we wait for the formation of the grid for the purposes of the race. But as we wait here, we do hope the weather may clear a little bit, given the amount of cloud we've got on this Fuji circuit. Indeed, that's not going to be helping our drivers. Indeed, it does make it look as though we've got a grey filter over all the cameras. But in terms of other talking points, Connor Acatella takes that pole position again in what is the Delta class, P9, ahead of Wiley Cox in P16. And Acatella, really, if he can convert that starting position into a top 10 overall finish today, and Wiley Cox does not come through the field, we anticipate he will come through the field, given what he demonstrated at Belle Isle. It's the case that Acatella could really build a championship campaign momentum, and that would do him very well going into some very difficult rounds ahead. But with that, let's take you through the grid. So it is the case as they line up on the grid today for round number 3 of the AlphaTauri Challenge Season 5, as brought to you on iRacing at the Fuji Speedway. It is the case we have Micah Hendricks on pole by 600ths ahead of Francois Schenck in a P2. The privateer ahead of the Beaver Buzz driver. Behind them on row number 2, Logan Mckinsey for Yellow Flag Motorsports, joined by Justin Rose for Breakfast for Dinner. Then James Carr for Breakfast for Dinner, being joined by Beaver Buzz's Jerome Bajulaz on row number 3. Row 4 is made up of John Lauzon and Jorge Zuniga on row number 4 there, and then behind them on row number 5, Connor Acatella taking that pole position in the Delta class ahead of David Bauer, the Breakfast for Dinner driver, P10. Robert Abrams, P11, a difficult qualifying session for Abrams. It must be noted, it is the case not in his traditional place, and the yellow flag motorsport driver will have to go toe-to-toe with Michael McLeod down to turn 1, who starts P12. Behind them, Daniel Smith from Torksteer Racing P13, Matt Shepka P14, his teammate. Both teammates from Torksteer Racing line up on row number 7. Row number 8 made up of Gurkin Demir and Wiley Cox, and it is case Wiley Cox, the second place Delta class driver. August Blondell and Eric Statzer, 2 Delta class drivers, they're P3, P4, P17, P18 on the overall grid on row number 9. Row number 10 is made up of Aaron Lahr and what is Jesse Bodaz, Daniel Cedino and Travis Hoare on what is row number 11. But we must cut away from the grid now, ladies and gentlemen, because we now wait for the race start. And it's the lights out, and away we go here for round number 3 as they all get underway and make the way down towards turn number 1. A bit of door rubbing there already between Hendricks and Schink, with Francois Schink getting the better lunge into turn number 1. Here it is the case, he's had the better start, but as they all come down under brake, and a bit of a lock up there further back, but all the drivers seemingly making it through. Oh, goodness me, there's a free wide moment there involving 2 of the breakfast for dinner drivers, and also I believe it's Robert Abrams. But meanwhile, further back, I think we've got a little bit of contact further back the field, but most drivers have safely made it through the opening corners. Indeed, there may have been some drivers out of sorts, but I think we've had all 25 drivers make it on through. And we look down to the closed cameras here, and it is the case of Francois Schink getting a very strong start, and James Carr has come from nowhere up into P2 as he makes his way. And indeed, Micah Hendricks falling backwards here after a very difficult launch of Micah Hendricks as they make the way through the hairpin of turns 6 and 7, and as they now head on down towards the Dunlop hairpin, it is the case that James Carr has got the unfavourable activity or task, if you will, of keeping the rest of the field behind. As you can see, Micah Hendricks here wants to get on through immediately. And Hendricks goes in very hot into turn number 10. He gets the inside here. Of course, you can do that in these touring cars. They're very strong on the brakes. And as he makes his way through turn 11 and 12, he has to yield there to James Carr, who gets the better run. Further back, however, we can see that Acatella, after qualifying in P9, has lost a lot of places at the start of this race. He's now side by side with Demir as they make their way through turn number 13 and up towards 14. And it is the case that Gurkin Demir gains the place as they roll the way on through into turn number 15 behind Wiley Cox here after what was a difficult qualifying session. Now sees his rival for the leader of the Delta class right in front of him. He's got his sights set on that position to Acatella as they make the way through the final corner here and down onto the start-finish straight. We see some drivers there running quite wide. In fact, we see August Blondell there running wide along with Travis Hoare as they head on down a bit further back there. That's Daniel Cedino. But after one lap, we have had what is Francois Schink having a brilliant start and converting that into the lead onto the second lap ahead of Micah Hendricks here. And behind, we've got 3 wide. It's Logan Mckinsey, Carr and Zuniga as they head down to the braking zone here for turn number 1. It's Zuniga on the inside here. It's Mckinsey in the middle, and it's going to be James Carr going around the outside. James Carr being very brave there to go round the outside on 2 drivers. A small sliver of contact and a bit of door rubbing as well. But as they make the way out to 2 and down towards 3, it is the case they are still 3 wide. But in the end, James Carr gives up the position there, recognising you do not go 3 wide into Coca-Cola, even at the most adventurous of times. And as they make the way down and around through turns 4 and 5 now through the double right, James Carr flashes lights left, right and centre. We see Jerome Bajulaz here getting involved as well. And I think he wants a piece of the action as the Beaver Buzz driver, and his teammate John Low's on behind as well. If you look at this, we see Bajulaz goes up the inside there of what is Carr, and Carr out of position as they make the way through the hairpin of turn 6 and 7 and down towards Dunlop they roll. And as they do, will we see John Low's on now consider sending out the inside into Dunlop? Well, if he's going to, he has a bit of an opportunity, given the fact that James Carr has to think more about the driver in front at the moment, or is trying to, and Lauzon sees the door open here. But does James Carr get a good exit? He does. He holds the position as we're here, and it is the case that Spencer Cockayne has had some connectivity issues. He may have gone to the pits. We'll have to wait for confirmation. But meanwhile, Robert Abrams here up the inside of what is David Bauer for P8 right now. Robert Abrams has had a relatively okay start. He's gained a couple of places. He's gained 2 places, and as he makes his way through Nets Bend, it is the case he's going to try and make it a third as he battles side by side with Bauer up the hill into turn number 16. And as he rolls on through here, it is the case they're still side by side as they make the way through the apex and down to the start finish straight. But Robert Abrams here now tucks in behind, given the slipstream, and we ride on board here with the championship leader as he makes his way down towards turn 1. And well, I can promise you right now, it only looks as though he can see David Bauer, but in fact he has got a whole host of cars in front of him as they make the one to lap number 3. And here it's all about being patient, sitting in the tow and waiting for that opportunity. Indeed, he's going to take a peek to the inside here, and I think David Bauer's going to either lift off or Turkey hang around the outside. I think Bauer there does a small lift off, but has let the car roll into the corner, and therefore they've gone toe-to-toe. But in this case, Robert Abrams getting the move done in the end, but he's had to take a bit more out of the car to get the move done. He moves up to P8, but David Bauer, they're staying with him as they make the way into turn number 3, and they roll the way on through. And Justin Rhodes not too far behind either is the breakfast for dinner driver as he makes his way through turns 4 and 5 and up towards 6. Behind them, we can see that Michael McLeod here, after what was a difficult start where he dropped a place, he's now on the back of Matt Shepka, who's gained 2 places at the start of this race. But look at the long snake train of drivers here as they roll their way through into turn number 6. It is the case that this is the pack all the way from P3 back to P14. Let me just emphasise that we have got 11 drivers within the space of 5 seconds right now. That's how close the racing is here as we look back up to the pack in front of Shepka, and it is the case they all make the way through nose to tail at this point. Oh, goodness me, there's a bit of a turn there for Justin Rhodes. I wonder if there was a bit of contact with Daniel Smith there behind, as we do see the Talksteer Racing driver getting very close to the back of Rhodes, and we do know that Daniel Smith really pushes that Veloster hard to stay with his rivals. Indeed, he's all over the back of a number of rivals last time out at Laguna Seca, but it was the case they just wasn't able to find his way through all the time. Where today he might be trying to do something different about that. As meanwhile, speaking of trying to go for a move, John Lauzon there trying to go up the inside of James Carr into the final corner, but notice there how Lauzon on that inside line, he had to brake the car much earlier compared to Carr, who just hung it around the outside, and that's what we mean with the final corner. The final corner here at Fuji has so much whip to it, you can hold it around the outside when someone goes up the inside. It's all about being bold on the brakes. And speaking of being bold here, Robert Abrams right now will be thinking about being bold, taking that P7 off Lauzon as they make the way down into turn number 1. He'll be up the inside again, much like previously on David Bauer and also Rhodes. And as he heads under braking now, I don't think Lauzon's going to battle this one too hard. I think he'll respect that Abrams at this point in the race is trying to show off a little bit more pace, and instead will just hang with him as they make the way down towards turn number 3. But Robert Abrams has gained 4 places and is continuing to try and push on. As they make the way into turn number 3, we do look from them to a bit further back, and particularly to Jesse Bodas here, who as he makes his way up through turn number 1, he's running P23 right now. It is the case he's had a very difficult start to this race, losing 3 places since the start, and I think caught out in the Constantina effect into turn number 1. Indeed, a number of drivers further down the order, I think, were a little bit nervous under braking, and as a result decided just to simply keep the car out the way, which is fair enough. It is the most safe thing to do, and just use a bit of the runoff strip going out of turn number 1. At least that's what our track sensors were telling us. But right now, Jesse Bodas chasing after Aaron Lahr, and Aaron Lahr has lost a lot at the start of the race today, in the fact that he's dropped all the way down to P22 from P19. But meanwhile, we look here to John Lauzon. Indeed, in fact, a bit further back, that's David Bauer having to defend versus his teammate. We've got a driver off there, and that's James Carr. James Carr has run wide at the turn 10 hairpin, and he's lost a number of places. In fact, James Carr has just lost what is, I think, 4 places for going wide at the Dunlop hairpin, and rather than try and bring the car back on and do the chicane, he's decided to straight line on and take the time penalty. And indeed, he's already served it, and that's sensible because of James Carr. If you can't return safely, then just straight line on, because it is the case you do have that tarmac to use. But James Carr making a mistake, and it is the case he now is down towards the bottom end of the top 10, not in the midfield of it. But meanwhile, we do look from them to our leader, and in fact, whilst we haven't been looking at him, Micah Hendricks has found his way back past Francois Schink as they make the way down towards turn number 1 here. It's happened off camera, but what I'm hearing in my ear, it happened in the final sector on that lap, and Hendricks now leads by only 4/10 of a second. Meanwhile, we see here up the inside of Jerome Bajulas is Robert Abrams for P5. Abrams continues to charge on here as the Beaver Buzz driver, I think, not want to give up the place, but it is the case he's going to have to give it up for the time being as they make the way into turn number 3, and as they brought their way through the left-hander, we do look in return to Michael McLeod here, who goes defensive, indeed battling for P11. He goes a little bit deep into turn number 3's exit, and as he makes his way into 4 here, well, Shepka's going to simply hang around the outside and say, don't mind if I do, if they head through turn number 4 and 5 and up towards 6. But can Shepka get the door shut? He does, but behind is that Acatella trying to go the inside of Smith, and Smith rolls it to the right. I'm not sure what's happened there to Smith. I think it's the case the car's gone completely on, but that is a jump to the pit. So Daniel Smith, whatever's happened there, whether it was a bit of netco contact with Conor Acatella or the steering wheel braking and going to the right, 100% sure. But what we do know is that Smith has had to jump to the pit, and that is a surprise and not a welcome one to be sure. And he joins, by looks of Spencer Cockayne, with an early retirement, and Cockayne not able to take to the grid as we understand it. Was the case experiencing technical issues when the gridding procedure was happening. But indeed, a little bit of drama already here at Fuji Speedway, and we've still got the best part of just over 50 minutes of racing to go, and it's not calming down anytime soon. And speaking of not calming down, here is Wiley Cox. We're right on board the gearbox of, and he has got pressure from Eric Statzer and also Gus Blondell, as we see Blondell there goes up the inside of Statzer, and Statzer leaving the door open there, and I don't think he saw Blondell coming, to be fair, because they made their way down the start-finish straight. Now Wiley Cox has the ultimate play here, which is he can choose which driver to give the slipstream to, and it is the case he's given the slipstream to Statzer, and Blondell will fall back as they make the way down towards turn number 1. It is a very long run, and of course, while Statzer looks a long way away right now, watch what happens when they get into the braking zone. It is the case that we are going to see Statzer get much larger in our picture, and indeed he does here under braking. In fact, he goes in very aggressive under braking. Now Wiley Cox, I think, might be doing a bit of brake and tyre preservation and simply just leaning the car into the corner, not aggressively hounding the brakes. It is the case, I think he's focusing more on the latter half of the race, as meanwhile they make the way into turn number 3, and Auguste Blondell meanwhile really trying to push on for Blue Flag Motorsports here. He sees P16 as an opportunity, not as a blocker, as they make the way down through turns 4 and 5, but as they head up through the right-hander and up towards the turn 6 hairpin, it is the case now we hit the 10-minute mark and rolling on through. No real calming down this race right now. It may look as though a lot of our drivers are in the line, but they are still all jinking and junking for position, and we can see here it is the case that Blondell trying to go round the outside of Statzer, make his way through turn number 8 and then down towards 10. The thing is going to be on the outside line all the way into the braking zone, and will that work out? Statzer can make this very difficult for Blondell. All he needs to do is park it on apex and not go too deep, and that's what exactly Statzer does. He puts it on apex and then maintains that line, puts it on the racing line through turns 11 and 12. He holds on to the position, but Gus Blondell definitely putting that pressure on and trying to find a way on through. I think Blondell's got to figure this one out on the final corner in terms of get in the draft in the run down towards turn number 1 and then do it on the brakes. But the problem, of course, with the Honda Elantra is it's not as strong on the brakes compared to the Honda Civic, and we have seen that time and time again, and Statzer will know that. He will know that he can brake approximately 10 to 15 metres later if he dares versus Blondell on the Elantra, and he will have that advantage to the line. But speaking of advantages here, well, here's Robert Abrams going for P3. It is the case he's been building up the momentum. He's up the inside here of Zuniga, and as he brakes down to the corner, you can see the car there weaving under brake, and that shows you how much rear bias that Abrams is running on the car, in the fact the car was snaking under braking. He's got to point the steering wheel exactly straight to stop the car from snaking, and as they make the way up towards 3, he gains another position. Meanwhile, further back there, and that's in the rear view picture, we see Justin Rhodes in a bit of a sandwich with his teammates, but meanwhile Connor Acatella here, he's on the right of your picture in the Veloster, battling with Gurkan Demir, and it is the case that Michael McLeod and Matt Shepka just in front are still battling for a position. This battle for P11 is not going away, and it is the case that whilst we have Hyundais all across the top 10, it's in a Honda Civic that leads the rest of the pursuing pack, and that is in the hands of Shepka in the lead of the picture there. But we focus on Acatella, our Delta class leader, as he makes his way through turn 6 and 7 and heads down towards turn number 10. But the problem for Acatella right now is the case that whilst he would like to gain some more ground, it does seem as though McLeod and Shepka have matched him, and in return Gurkan Demir right now is watching this battle, and I think after making those early gains, the Torque Racing driver is now settling into a rhythm as he goes a bit deep under braking there into Dunlop, and I think just getting carried away in the warm air, or the dirty air if you will, off the back of the Veloster, and needs to keep it together, as we're hearing that Aaron Lahr has come into the pit lane, and I do believe that Aaron Lahr has retired due to an issue with the car. It seems that there's a problem with the engine of that Hyundai Elantra, and it is the case that Lahr has taken a retirement, which is very unfortunate. 25 starts of this race, we now only have 22 back out on circuit. I say only is the case, we've still got the majority of the field here, but we never like to hear of a retirement. It is unfortunate, and we do wish Lahr, Smith and Cockayne all the best heading into next round. But as we continue to look here at Gurkan Demir chasing after Acatella in front, with McLeod and Shepka just ahead of him, it is the case that they stay at line astern right now. And meanwhile, we look to Robert Abrams here, who's under a lot of pressure from what is Zuniga, and in fact what is Jorge Zuniga here really pushing on, and we ride on board with the newcomer to this season and a returnee from previous seasons, and right now he is going hunting after that P3 position. And as they roll the way into turn number 3, just again, look at that body language on the car of Abrams. That is a very unstable car, but he's done that intentionally with the setup of that Elantra. It's snaking its way under braking left, right and centre, and we saw it into turn 1. We've just seen it again into turn 3. And as they make the way into turn number 6 now under braking, through the hairpin they go, and down towards Dunlop. The again, it's the case that Zuniga just seems to be a little bit more composed, but in return, when Abrams gets it right, you can see where he gains the advantage with the rear of the car being less planted. But of course, the downside is if he gets it even slightly wrong under braking, he will lose a lot of time. It's all about trying to find that flow and rhythm, and Robert Abrams right now really under a lot of pressure as they roll the way through turns 11 and 12 and up towards 13 they go, and as they do, you can see that both drivers just using as much entry curve as possible on that left hand side curbing in order to be able to open the corner up, and that's what you've got to do in this latter half of the lap. You've really got to use the track width to your advantage, and in doing so you'll be able to stay ahead of the rest of the pack. And speaking of the rest of the pack, it is the case with Logan Mckinsey only 7 attempts behind these two as they roll the way out to the final corner, and now down the start finish straight they go once again. As they do, you can see this is P3 all the way down to P10. Indeed, it is the case. We've got 8 drivers here separated by a margin of no greater than 5 seconds. We'd love to see it, and will anybody see this pack open up? Will it be the case that somebody will make a mistake and potentially open it on up, or will they stay as they are? Zuniga's going to take a look for a move here, down to 1, but he's not close enough to go for it. Meanwhile, John Lauzon here taking a look at his teammate Pajulaz, and I think they're communicating to make the swap. Although I say that, I don't think that was communicated, that John Lauzon was going to swipe Pajulaz, and it's the case I think they're just going a little bit too deep on the brakes and locking up under braking. And fortunately for the pair of them, it wasn't more serious. It was a tap in the end. If that had been a little bit more aggressive in terms of the speed at which they collided, that could have seen both Beaver Buzz drivers having to make a trip to the pits, but it's not to be here. But I think right now Jerome Pajulaz may be on the radio to the team manager to simply say, what on earth was that all about? And as they make the way through 5 and up towards 6, it is the case. It looks though James Carr here has seen this and is thinking about putting some pressure on, because he makes his way through turns 6 and 7 and down towards Dunlop once again as we clear the first quarter of this race. We've still got 45 minutes to go. This race now starting to settle down a little bit more in terms of the battling. We're now starting to see a little bit more of a focus perhaps on strategy, although I say that and then James Carr says, we'll hold up a second, I want to go on the offensive here versus Pajulaz, and he's very close behind Pajulaz, but he hasn't found a way on through right now. It is the case our drivers will make the way up through the chicane and up into the 13th corner. Right now James Carr getting a move on, and to be fair, breakfast for dinner, well, if they wanted camera time, and indeed their sponsors wanted camera time, they've got it, because all 3 cars right now are running together in a single camera shot. And as they make the way up towards turn number 16, well, they're all chasing after Jerome Pajulaz, and the Beaver Buzz outfit will know they've got a lot of pressure behind. But David Bauer here seemingly struggling through the final set of corners versus his teammate Justin Rhodes, and Rhodes really riding on the rear of his teammate, and I wonder if there will be a swap for position in the near future, or whether they'll do it in the pits. But meanwhile, we do look from them to what is Gurkin Tamir here, and we can see that's Wiley Cox pulling off the race in line. Wiley Cox, I think, is going to be the first driver to make his way into the pits for a scheduled stop. Now, this is going to be quite the undercut, given the fact we're not even really close to halfway of the race so far, and he makes his way on in. Unless we're expecting more than 1 stop here today, but there's only 1 mandatory stop on the cards. But meanwhile, we look from him to what is Travis Hoare here, and right now Travis Hoare and the Honda have lost to the right of the 2 cars in the camera. Now on the left hand side as the camera turns round, it is the case he's battling with Adrian Fedorowski here for P18. Fedorowski on the inside here in the Honda versus the Hyundai of Hoare, and as they make their way under braking now, I think the Canadian's going to get it done as they roll the way through the apex. In fact, Travis Hoare going very deep into the corner there. I think not used to be on that outside line, and how much the car gets carried downhill, because it is a downhill drop through the apex of turn 1. And as they make the way up towards turn number 3, Travis Hoare loses the position. Fedorowski starting to gain some ground after a very difficult start to the race, but as they head on through turns 4 and 5, we must look back up to Connor Acatella here, and it is the case he's just found his way past Matt Shepka. In fact, Shepka off racing line now, I think he's run wide, and he's having to take a slow down here, Shepka, for running wide on a corner. He's been adjudged to have taken some time, or at least gained time, and perhaps he would argue I haven't gained any time in fact, but that's the automated shielding system saying he's got to give up the time. Indeed, yielding there to Gurkin Tamir as they make the way up through the chicane, and right now Connor Acatella being given the opportunity to go chasing after Michael McLeod as they make the way up towards Nets Bend. As they head uphill through the left-hander here, 18 minutes complete, still another, what is 42 on the clock. We have had Wiley Cox come out the pit lane. He's now running in P21, the second to last of our running positions, with what is Brandon Veers down in P22, having started from the pit lane. But as they make the way on through here, we've just had confirmation from Matthew Shepka in the YouTube chat. It is the case that he's let Gurkin Tamir, his teammate, on through due to the relative pace between the 2 drivers, which is fair play. Bit of teamwork there, credit to the team. But meanwhile, we can see that Acatella falling backwards, and indeed that goes to show they've lost a really hitting a wall in terms of speed. down the start-finish straight, and, well, the Elantra and also the Honda Civic just going on here, unless Acatella's trying to do quite some fuel saving down the start-finish straight, but meanwhile behind, he's going to have to worry about the fact he's got Auguste Blondel here, and right now Blondel, having moved up to P15 gradually over the course of this race so far, he's now in P2 of our Delta drivers. He can see the Delta leader Acatella right firmly in front of him, and I don't think the Blue Flag Motorsport driver is going to hesitate. If he can pull the trigger on a move, he's going to do it here, because he'd love to upset the momentum of the championship leader in the Delta class as they roll the way down, and we can see as they come through 4 and 5 on our time town, we've got Jesse Bodas into the pits for a scheduled stop by the sounds of things, so we are seeing more and more stops come on in here already early on in the race, but I do wonder where it's the case that those stops in fact perhaps drive through penalties, although I say that it is one of the situations right now where I think they're actually being taken as pit stops, so it could be the case just some very early stops coming on in and attempts at undercuts being made, but as our drivers roll the way down into turn number 10, in fact I think Jesse Bodas has made his way through the pit lane, in fact Wiley Cox as well. I think he's drive through penalties. We have not had any timings to indicate they've actually stopped in their pit boxes, so indeed that is going to be a conundrum for our drivers as well, in the fact that we do have that 9 times instant count point limit for drive-through penalties, and right now that's Blondel chasing after Acatella and really putting that pressure on as we ride on board here with the Hyundai Elantra driver chasing after the smaller Hyundai of the Veloster. But as they roll the way on through the corners here, it is the case that Blondel will now have the run down the start-finish straight, and he'll be looking to try and use that toe to his advantage, indeed, like every driver will, but it's a long run, and indeed Acatella is in the toe of Shepka as they make the way on down towards the braking zone. Now, will we see anything? No, I think Blondel just hanging back here. He's not close enough to be able to go for the move, and instead we'll have to play the patience game as they break their way down to turn 1. Although I say that, he's got to look for the move here. My goodness, he's going to go very late on the brakes, and Blondel there, I think, capitalising on what is Acatella being boxed in behind Shepka, and he gets the move done. But here comes Acatella. He's looking to come back, but in fact he tucks back in there, and Auguste Blondel with a very, very bold move takes the lead of the Delta class. He moves up to P14, but the problem for him is, as we run on board his gearbox, it is a case we've got Auguste Blondel here, who is really under pressure now from Acatella. Got Acatella putting that pressure on, and he will not want to just yield that position. It is the case that that Veloster will look menacing in the rearview mirror, and it's being driven by a driver who's very determined to take every point he can as they make the way down towards what is turn number 10. But as they come charging on down at this point, it is the case that our drivers pressing on as they roll the way into Dunlop hairpin, and as they head through turn number 10, you see it, Blondel there getting a bit out of sorts on the line. In fact, Acatella trying to take a peek to the inside into turn number 11. He can't quite find it and instead has to wait. Instead, Blondel's going to look up the inside of Shepka here, but in doing the half-committed move whereby he gets his nose alongside, but he can't force the move through to a side-by-side run up towards the next bend. All this does to Blondel's race is it hurts him in terms of carrying speed around the rest of this sector, and right now Acatella will look to this and think that he's got to try and get himself close enough as meanwhile Blondel goes up the inside here. Shepka, there's contact between the two of them, but he has to yield there, otherwise he would have pushed the driver wide, and indeed Shepka holds the position. But meanwhile Zuniga's into the pits, and we must look to the front of the field here, particularly in the battle of what is P5, and that is John Lauzon ahead of what is almost 4 wide here. Behind him he has got Jerome Bajulas, followed by David Bauer, and then James Carr and Rhodes behind Justin Rhodes, all squabbling for what is P6 behind John Lauzon in P5. And indeed in this case the breakfast for dinner drivers here, I think, trying to squabble amongst each other as much as they are in terms of trying to eat what is the Beaver Buzz machine of Jerome Bajulas for breakfast as they make their way down through turns 4 and 5, and perhaps they just can't decide who's going to eat first on the menu here. But as they make their way through turns 4 and 5, it is the case that Bajulas do a very good job of keeping the B4D army at bay as they head out to the hairpin of turns 6 and 7. As they make the way on down here, it is the case we can see how David Bauer now at the head of his teammates. I think they all want to be the lead driver here. I think they all feel as though they're a little bit faster than their peers, but it's to no avail. And we should point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise for this. When I said earlier about the fact that our drivers who are coming at drive-through penalties is a bit of confusion, I can confirm I've actually just been fed the data for the purposes of the pit stop times, and no, it was the case that Brandon Bears, and it was Brandon Bears who came on in. He has taken an actual pit stop. Meanwhile, it is the case that Wiley Cox has not taken the time, so therefore he did have a drive-through penalty. So it's a combination of the two, and Wiley Cox with that drive-through for the instant point count. Now that we've got that data, we can keep you informed if anybody else does pick up a drive-through penalty here with track limits. But meanwhile, we do look here to what is David Bowers. He leads the breakfast for dinner drivers down towards the start-finish line and onwards towards turn number 1. And as they come rolling them down here, it is the case that David Bowers finally breaking away from his teammates a little bit. But you can see in the rear of the picture there, that is Michael McLeod, Gurkin Demir and Matt Shepker a bit further back, and they are all looking ahead of them and thinking, can we get close enough to that battle? As meanwhile, we can see they're peeling over, and I think making his way into the pits is our Delta driver, Con Acatella, and well, he's been in this battle with Blundell and Statzer, and I think he's decided, right, enough's enough, I need to come on in, and indeed that releases Gus Blundell to lead the Delta class in comfort, not with the pressure of Acatella, but he's still got Statzer behind, and Blundell takes a little bit of a peek to the inside there versus Shepka as they make their way into turn number 1. No change this time, but I do wonder here where Acatella will benefit from pitting first, or whether it is the case that in fact he will end up losing out as they roll the way through the left-hander here at turn number 3. Time will tell for Acatella, but in the meanwhile, as they make the way on, around and down, we're now almost at 25 minutes into this race. I can tell that Acatella taking a 13-second stop. It's a quick stop for Acatella. It is a case of quick splash and dash, and perhaps there could be a second stop on the cards here. We'll have to wait and see. We are expecting the one mandatory stop, of course, but if extra stops are needed, our drivers are allowed to take them. As meanwhile, oh, goodness me, Micah Hendricks there. Well, we just caught the tail end of it, but I think he's got it very wrong. That's at turn number 13, and our race leader in the Lego Hyundai Veloster, it is the case that Privateer into the wall almost there at turn number 13, and now bringing it back together. He's lost 2 places, he's down to P3, and your race leader once again is Francois Schenk, as we see Schenk here making his way down the start-finish straight, and well, he's got a nice gap of what is the best part of 7 seconds, not to the driver behind, who is Brandon Veres on picture, but in this case the driver behind in timing, and that is Robert Abrams here. Do keep in mind, of course, Robert Abrams starting in P11 has made his way up to P2, and he's not losing sight of the lead. But meanwhile, we see peeling into the pits there, making his way on in. That is James Carr. But meanwhile, Jerome Bajulaz and what is John Lauzon swapping places to the 2 Beaver Buzz drivers as Bajulaz goes up the inside here. John Lauzon not battling this, not forcing his teammates to the inside line. But look at this, David Bauer looking up the inside here, trying to sneak on through. But Bajulaz reacts immediately. This is brilliant stuff from Beaver Buzz. And you can see what they're trying to do now is box David Bauer in for the run to turn number 3. That was a great reaction there from Lauzon and Bajulaz, but it hasn't worked out as they make the way out towards 3. They thought they boxed him in, but it's the case that Bauer had enough momentum and Lauzon just was not able to bring the car across the cover of Bauer, and in the end John Lauzon has lost 2 places. But you could see as they made the way through 1, and with Bauer getting so close to the back of Bajulaz started to park it on apex a little bit to try and make it so that he only took the place of his teammate and didn't leave the door open for Bauer, but Lauzon just didn't get the run out of the first corner and lost out. And as they make the way down towards turn number 10 at this point, it is the case now that Rhodes will be thinking about this and thinking how he can get into the fight against John Lauzon, who seems to be a little bit light on pace compared to his teammate right now, and Rhodes would love to be with Bauer as they roll the way through the chicane sequence and up towards the 13th corner. As they head on up into the very tricky turn 15. In this case, a bit further behind Michael McLeod, 7 seconds off of this battle and falling back very gradually. And really, I can tell you that right now, the 49 seems to be the place to be in terms of lap time for our Alpha drivers, the Blue Slash drivers, of course. Meanwhile, for our Delta drivers, it's the 50s, which seems to be the place to be, unless you're Gus Blundell or Eric Statzer, where you're in the 49s as well. But it is also very dependent on whether you've got the draft here. But Justin Rhodes is saying no to the draft off the back of John Lauzon. He wants the draft of his teammate. He looks up the inside there into the final corner, and now they'll be side by side in the long run down towards turn number 1. And indeed, as we look to the blimp camera here, well, it's a long shot, but indeed it's a very long straight, and as the camera just gradually loses distance on the drivers, this gives you a perspective of how long that straight is, and the fact that Rhodes still trying to keep his nose in, and as they make their way down to the braking zone here, he's not backing out of this. Rhodes is committing to the move here. Credit to him, and Lauzon's made to go a little bit deep into the corner to give the space. He has the right, does Justin Rhodes, to be there, and as they make the way through too, Lauzon's not going to give up, but Rhodes gets ahead, covers off the middle of the road, and John Lauzon tucks in behind. He takes another sneak peek going into turn number 3, but no such opportunity is afforded, and Justin Rhodes moves up to P7 on circuit. As they roll their way down through turns 4 and 5, we do look from them to Adrian Fedorowski here, and it is the case the QZ Motorsports A driver chasing after what is Travis Hoare there as they head down into turn number 1. And Fedorowski has gained a number of places. Do keep in mind, of course, that we have had some retirements. In fact, we've had the retirement of Jorge Zuniga. I'm not sure what's happened there. He came in about 18 minutes into this race, which could have been a scheduled stop, but Zuniga has had to take a pit stop. Indeed, was in the pits for 2 minutes and 10 seconds before the car was retired. So I think a technical issue there has hit the car, but as they roll their way on down through turns 4 and 5, it is the case that Fedorowski right now trying to put that pressure onto Travis Hoare here in the battle for P3 of the Deltas, but effectively P14 overall position is the only thing that matters here in terms of getting points, but class position in terms of getting a little bit of a one-upmanship on your peers. And we're just having a message there from Assuming One in the YouTube chat to say that there are complications with lap traffic for Micah Hendricks, and that explains why we saw Micah Hendricks pointing the wrong way at turn number 13. So there's been a bit of an incident between Hendricks and some backmarker traffic, and that is very unfortunate for Hendricks. It does happen, and it's happened to our race leader, but of course the tables turn, and you never know what can happen in the second half of this race as we make our way into the final minute of the first half. And Fedorowski trying to stay close here to the back of Travis Hoare, but Travis Hoare seems to be a bit more hooked up in the latter half of the lap, and that's where the gap opens. But he won't be hooked up if he takes too much of the sausage curve there on the exit of 15, and you could see the car actually bouncing over the yellow curb, and with the low ride height on these cars, no sausage curves quite high, you can imagine when that front bumper essentially hits the sausage curve, it launches the car upwards, and when the car's up in the air, it's not a happy place to be behind the wheel. I can tell you it is the case. The car, you're waiting for it to land on the suspension, and if you hit those curves too hard too often, you can break the suspension, particularly on that front axle, and that will lead to a very early retirement. As we see Travis Hoare here under pressure now from Fedorowski as they make the way in towards turn number 1. Will the Honda driver go for the move? No, he stays behind the Honda Veloster driver and waits an opportunity. As meanwhile, Wiley Cox into the pits from what we now believe is his scheduled stop, and here he is making his way on in. And well, after that drive-through penalty for track limits, Wiley Cox definitely another day not to remember so far. It has gone wrong for the second place driver in the Delta Class Championship, and indeed right now we do look from him to Connor Acatella, and Acatella is building that momentum up after that very early pit stop as he makes his way through turn number 1, and as he heads down towards turn number 3 right now, it is the case that Acatella definitely trying to deliver in terms of this result, but to do so he's got to find a way of making this undercut work versus a very fast charging Gus Blondell. And speaking of Blondell, where is he? Here he is on camera. He's making his way up through turns at 14 and up to 15 right now, and it is the case he's in P10 overall with Gurkendamir and Matt Shepka behind, and Blondell is not pulling any punches. He's found his way past Gurkendamir up into the top 10. And whilst the pit stop may see him lose a position or two, overall he's aware of the fact he's got to deliver versus Acatella, who's down in P17. Keeping in mind, of course, that all of our drivers from P15 upwards have yet to pit, and it is the case that what is James Carr is the first of our drivers who has pitted out on circuit in P16, and when I say pitted, has taken their scheduled stop as we understand it for fuel. As we now make our way into the second half of this race, and let's take you through that race order very shortly, but before we do, let's look at Fedorowski here versus Travis Hoare, still battling of the two of them for this P14 position, and Fedorowski getting the better run out of the final corner initially, but now as we head up towards top gears, this is where the Honda of course loses out. It's not got the straight line speed compared to the Hyundais, and as they make the way down here, well, you can see Travis Hoare, he's got himself just ahead, but Fedorowski will not be left behind. But in the end, it is the case the QZ Motorsports A driver tucks in behind and decides to wait to fight another day. But with that battle settled for a brief moment, let's take you through the order from the top all the way through as it currently stands. And right now it is Francois Schinck who leads this race, having started the race from P2. It is the case he gained the lead of Micah Hendricks early on with a brilliant start. Hendricks came back at him and got back into the lead, but then after a bit of a confrontation with some lap traffic, it is the case that Hendricks was off at turn 13, and Francois Schinck has come on through, and the Beaver Buzz driver keeping it together as he makes his way down towards turn number 1. He's yet to pit, however, and he has only got an advantage of 5.5 seconds ahead of Robert Abrams, the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver, who right now running P2, having started in P11, he has gained the most places out of everybody so far and is going for the most overtakes of the round award. And it is the case that Micah Hendricks behind in P3, the privateer here in the 473 car, trying to gain as many places back as possible, and he's going for the move for P2 down into turn number 1, and under the braking they're going. Hendricks there up the inside, and I don't think Abrams wants to battle this given the fact he's had to come through so many places. I think Robert Abrams at this point is in a little bit of a cool down mode here and focusing on just nursing the car to its first pit stop. So the move for P2 has been made by Hendricks, and now Hendricks has got a 5.5 second gap to close down to the race leader of Schink. But Mike Hendricks' story, of course, starting on pole, and then at one instant has seen him drop down to P3, now back up to P2, and in this case Robert Abrams in P3 having made the most overtakes of everybody so far as we understand it. And then a bit further behind in P4, the best part of what is 4 to 5 seconds back. In fact 5 seconds down, we've had an update on our timer. It is the case that Yellow Flag Motorsports is Logan Mckinsey chasing after his teammate Robert Abrams. These two are quite close together earlier on, but it is the case that Abrams has broken away, and Mckinsey right now in a bit of a no man's land here, not really gaining on the drivers in front of him, but matching, if not pulling away from the drivers behind him. And Logan Mckinsey doing a very solid job here, really being the best of the rest outside of the top 3. We then look to Jerome Bajulas running in P5. The Beaver Buzz driver has had a bit of a back and forth with his teammate John Lowes on. The two of them have been working together as much as possible, but with the onslaught of the breakfast for dinner driver pack coming on through, you can see that whilst Bajulas has broken away, we've got breakfast for dinners Justin Rhodes here in P6 ahead of David Bauer in P7, his teammate, and then there is John Lowes on taking a sliver up the inside through turn 13, but he can't quite find it right now as they roll the way for it. John Lowes is going to go to the inside. Oh, there's a whack between the two drivers there, and I think John Lowes on seeing the space on the inside and going for it, but it is the case they make the way out of 15 and into 60. He's had to back out, but that was quite a shunt between the two drivers, it must be said, and I don't think there's going to be major damage to the cars. That may unsettle both drivers, and I think David Bauer right now will not be too happy as he peels into the pits here. I think he's decided if we come together like that any more times, we're only going to lose race time. So Bauer into the pits from P7. John Lazon will take that P7 on track, and then behind him Michael McLeod here, and it is the case. You're looking at him, he is the left of the two drivers in your picture. That is Brandon Vers on the right. He's down in P21. He's a lap down now on Michael McLeod. They make their way down the start finish straight. Michael McLeod earlier in the race battling to stay within the top 10 has now got himself into P8 subject to a pit stop of course, which needs to be taken, and it is the case that Michael McLeod again, much like Logan Mckinsey up in P4, neither here nor there in terms of a bit of a no man's land and really pressing on. We then have our Delta leader of Gus Blondell here, the Blue Flag Motorsports driver who's yet to pit. He's running in P9 and has really come through the field with 8 places gained so far, and as he heads down towards turn number 3, in this case behind him he has got Gurkan Demir, the Torksteer racing driver, putting that pressure on as much as possible. Then Eric Statzer in at P11 here, followed by Matt Shepka in at P12, and these drivers all squabbling for that P10 in this pack as they roll away from Matt Shepka, giving way to Gurkan Demir early on, his teammate from Torksteer Racers. We see Stats up the inside, and that's a very bold move there from the privateer. Well, to be fair, do you go for it from that far back into the turn 6 hairpin? Not normally, but Eric Statzer thought he would give it a try, and kudos for trying. He almost made it work, and you could see Gurkan Demir in the end saw it was coming, opened the steering wheel just enough. That was very close for Eric Statzer, trying to show, much like Blondell, much like Acatella, it is the case that the Delta drivers do love to get into the fight with the Alphas, and indeed Eric Statzer pushing on right now, and well, in doing so he has stayed behind Gurkan Demir by half a second, but he'll be looking for another move later on, there's no doubt about that. But as we look from them to Travis Hoare in P13 here, in his case battling for position versus his rival in the Delta class of Adrian Fredorowski. These two squabbling for P13, P14 at the moment. And looks like Travis Hoare has got the advantage for the time being. We then have James Carr in P15, and it is the case he is the first of our drivers. He is our leading pit stop complete driver, i.e. he's taken his mandatory pit stop for fuel, and now he's just got to get to the end as he goes a bit deep there at turn number 13. He won't want to keep doing that, but that could be a sign of tyre wear starting to build for a lot of drivers, and we'll talk more about that very shortly as he rolls his way through turn number 15, and he's got his teammate David Bauer behind him. Remember, David Bauer pitted what was, if I remember correctly in terms of the sequence of things, he pitted after. In fact, he recently pitted compared to James Carr. So Bauer has actually a lot gained now. Oh, goodness me. And James Carr, was that a collapsed suspension I saw there? It was. He's had to jump to the pits unless I'm very much mistaken. James Carr has had to retire from hitting the sausage curb on the exit of turn 16. We talked about that earlier on in the fact that if you hit the curb too hard, too frequently on the exits, particularly at turn number 16, it will kill the suspension. suspension, and that was a collapsed suspension on James Carr's machine, and breakfast for dinner have had a retirement from this race, and that is a disaster for them. But meanwhile, we do look from P15 driver David Bauer to Connor Acatella, P16, and right now he is our leading Delta driver who has pitted, and he is ahead of Daniel Sedino, who's yet to pit down in P17, and a difficult day for the Blue Flag Motorsport driver, just has not gone his way at all, having started in P21. We've then got the retirement of James Carr, of course. He's listed at P18 at the moment. We may expect him to drop later on because we've got Wiley Cox out on circuit, who had to take a drive-through penalty 15 minutes into this race due to breaching the track limits number in terms of 9 instant points or more for what was the drive-through penalty limit, and he makes his way down right now and really just trying to bring home some points today. And then we have what is Jesse Bodas there, currently running P20. He'll move up to P19 as he passes Carr, who's in the pit lane in terms of the timings, and he heads on down to P19, and then Brandon Vez will complete the top 20 there, and the last of our runners out on circuit as he makes his way down start finish straight and looking to soldier on. And keep in mind, of course, that Brandon Vez started from the pit lane due to not making the grid within the allotted time, and it was the case that the privateer in the end has really just been soldiering on to bring some points home. But speaking of bringing some points home, well, here is Eric Statzer battling with Gurkan Demir as they head down the start finish straight, and as they do, we've got a lot of pit stops happening at the moment. We've got John Lauzon and Robert Abrams into the pits. Robert Abrams has just come out of the pit lane. Where is he, I hear you ask? Well, here he is making his way on out, and as he does, that's John Lauzon parked up behind, still being serviced, but Robert Abrams will come out here at the lead of the pit stop pack, if you will, in the fact there's John Lauzon as well. Now, where is David Bauer is the big question, as we've got Hort and Fedorowski in. Well, here comes David Bauer. He makes his way on down the start-finish straight, but it's such a long run, and I think John Lauzon's going to come out ahead of him here. So it is the case that John Lauzon will comfortably return out ahead of David Bauer, and now he's just got to get the car back up to speed and then run it on through and see if he can gain some places to the rest of his peers who he was batting for position earlier on, as they've yet to pit, and this will be an undercut effectively for John Lauzon as he makes his way through the Coca-Cola corner of turn 3. But as he rolls his way on through at this point, of course, there's still plenty of pit stops on the board as Fedorowski and Travis Hort into the pits together. And it is the case that Fedorowski, in fact, has jumped back ahead of Travis Hort through the pit stops. They make the way on down. Indeed, Travis Hort at this point will be thinking, I'm destined to battle with Fedorowski for the entirety of this race. It would seem that way. But meanwhile, more importantly, right now, at the front of the pack, I should say, Francois Schink coming into the pit and just behind Micah Hendricks. And the gap between the two of them, when they came on in, it was coming down from 5 seconds. Logan Mckinsey will go on to take the lead of this race and will lead a lap and will take a point for a lap led. So that's why he stayed out, I think, to gain a point and also keep himself clear of any potential risk of traffic here. Logan Mckinsey deciding to go long, and we actually see him there in the YouTube chat saying that I was out there on an island for so long, glad other people had others to race with. And indeed, sometimes that's the way it does go. And Logan Mckinsey's race today, it really has been a bit of a lonely one, but to be fair, he hasn't put a foot wrong, and that is the sign of somebody who's keeping it consistent, even when the concentration could be found wanting. But meanwhile, with everything that's going on right now, Micah Hendricks has already taken his pit stop. My goodness, that was a very quick pit stop. But to be fair, in terms of the gap, well, it was quick, but it wasn't as quick as Francois Schink's pit stop. And it is the case Francois Schink returns back out in front as they make the way down. In fact, if I read my timings correctly, it was the case that Schink came out. Well, in fact, Schink's pit stop was a second slower, so do forgive me there. It's the case, misreading the timings. Mike Hendricks has gained a second through the pits, but Hendricks is still 5 seconds behind Schink as they make the way back up to speed here with less than 20 minutes to go. But as they do at this point, of course, we've still got the top 4 to pit. We've still got Daniel Sedino to pit as well, and then after that, it'll be the run to the finish. So the big question you may be thinking about at this point is, well, what happens from this point onwards? What should we watch out for? Well, keep in mind, of course, these cars have been running on the same set of tyres. Indeed, I can tell you that everybody who's come into the pit has not changed tyres. They've only put fuel in the car because they all feel as though one set of tyres is good enough to go to the end. But the problem, of course, with that is as the time wears down, indeed, it is the case that tyre wear builds up, particularly those front tyres, they will really start to lose their natural grip. It is the case. These touring car class machines, these TCR class machines, use those front tyres more than the rears. The front tyres do all the turning, they do all of the power deployment as well. It is the case that they are worn so much more compared to the rears. Even with our drive runners make much brake bias as possible to the rear, it is the case they batter the front tyres at the expense of the rear tyres being much more comfortable, as we'll in that Logan Mckinsey and Justin Rhodes are into the pits, and it is the case that Blondell and also Stats are coming on in, so this is where we start to see the table turn in terms of the battles for lead. Here is Francois Xing, who we believe will come on through to retake the lead overall this race as he makes his way down and past the pit. In this case, he returns to the lead. What about Micah Hendricks? Well, Hendricks is coming on through here. Logan Mckinsey has taken his pit stop and he's making his way on now, but Hendricks will come out ahead. Robert Abrams comes out ahead of his teammates as well, so Mckinsey is destined to P4 today. But look, in fact, how much time Mckinsey has gained on the top three by running long here. Is the case he's actually got the gap to Abrams down to what is now about 4 seconds, all things considered. But the bigger question here is Auguste Blondell, who has completed his pit stop. Where is Acatella? I hear you ask. Well, here comes Acatella down the start-finish straight. This is going to be very close between the two of them. Acatella makes his way down towards turn 1. Blondell, meanwhile, it is the case. Where is Auguste Blondell? He's on the left. In fact, he comes out behind, and Acatella in the end gets back out ahead after coming into the pits just before the halfway mark. Blondell going the best part of 40 minutes without pitting. Well, it hasn't given him the ability to jump ahead, and if anything, Blondell has come out into a battle now with Gurkan Demir, and the Torque Racing driver will not want to let this go. And I think it's the case that Connor Acatella decided to pit so early and come out in clear traffic. Well, he lost the run of the slipstream, of course, but what he lost with regards to slipstream, he gained in terms of putting in laps, lap after lap in that clear air without hindrance, and Blondell has lost out here. In fact, the gap between Blondell and Acatella to be the winner in the Delta class, it's the best part of the moment, of which 6 seconds, as we can see Acatella there briefly at the top of the camera off in the distance. But as the camera turns around right now, Auguste Blondell is focusing on one thing, and that is taking the fight here to Gurkan Demir. In fact, Demir, well, he's on that inside line there. We just lost sight of him for a brief moment. And as he makes his way down towards the Dunlop hairpin, it is Auguste Blondell really keeping that pressure on as we now ride on board with Blondell, and we've got full sight of what's Gurkan Demir as they make the way through the chicane. But as they do, Blondell gets a better exit. He looks at the inside into the 13th corner, but he can't find a way to take that inside side by side. And as they make their way through 14 and 15, Demir, they're just slightly stepping out on the rear of the Elantra. And as they head through a left-hander with both drivers, of course, in the Hyundai Elantra, it is the case. Blondell definitely showing his fangs in this late stage of the race and not uncomfortable with that tyre wear, fully comfortable with the car. And that is the big question now. Who will feel comfortable with front tyres that have seen 45 minutes of racing and indeed are very heavily worn? As we see here, Blondell will get the run on his rival down towards turn number 1. But of course, the thing is, he's now got a very long charge, and Demir will be looking to simply hold that middle line and make sure that Blondell has to go the long way round, indeed widen the corner. But as they head down into the braking zone, he'll be a battle on the brakes, and Blondell goes a little bit late on the brakes, but then Demir trail brakes into the apex, steps out a bit deep as they make their way through, but Demir gets it done for now, or does it? Blondell here will get the run down towards turn number 3, but again he finds himself on the outside to a corner where going around the outside can be very challenging. He's going to try, however. Demir cuts right across the apex there. That's run limits of track limits, and you can see they're clipping the V-shaped exit curve a bit aggressively, and Demir almost losing the car there. He's kept it pointing a straight line for now, but Blondell definitely really putting on huge pressure, and this is the closest battle on circuit as it currently stands. We'll stay with it for the time being, but Gurkan Demir definitely under pressure for that P11 position as they make their way out turns 6 and 7. And I think maybe feeling the crunch with regards to that front tyre wear. It has been the case that a lot of drivers have been pushing very hard since the start of this race, and now it is starting to come back to haunt them in terms of the amount of grip they have available. Blondell looks up the inside here. Demir simply takes the natural run through. You can see Blondell, what he was trying to do there is put himself on an inside line to get Demir to go deep into the corner, being distracted and outbrake himself. But it is the case the Turkish driver makes no such error and instead holds on as they make their way through the 13th and up towards Nets Bend. But as they head in towards turn number 15 now, will we see a change between them? No, we do not. But meanwhile, I can tell you it is the case that the Torque Racing driver will have reinforcements, because his teammate Matt Shepka is inching closer here as the Honda driver rolls his way up into turn number 16. And as he does, he'll be hoping he can get into that toe as they make their way out to the final corner and down towards turn number 1. As they charge him down, he's not close enough at the moment, and in fact, if anything, as the sun starts to really set away from the circuit and the headlights come on for most of our drivers now, it is the case. Blondell here, we're looking to make the pass with 13.5 minutes to go. He looks up the inside. Demir does not defend the inside this time. Does he have a cutback planned, or is it the case he's decided he just hasn't got it in the car anymore? Well, Blondell goes to the move. Demir simply parks it initially behind, but as they make their way out of the corner here, I think it is the case that Demir has let Blondell go for the time being. Perhaps he's hoping that Blondell can pull them up towards Acatella in the battle for P10, given the fact fact that Acatella right now is 6 seconds up the road. It will have to be seen, but I think it could be more of a sign here that Damir's tyres are starting to fall away, because that does not look as though it's a Hyundai Lancia that's turning very well, particularly through these medium speed apexes, and I think Shepka will be no more than happy to help his teammate out by swapping the places back compared to earlier on. But as they make their way through turns 6 and 7 right now, we'll have to wait and find out if that's the way it is going to play out between them as they make their way down towards Dunlop once again. Rolling on through the kink of 8 and down towards 9 and 10. Into 10 they go. It is the case that Shepka here just sits behind his teammate for the time being, but I can imagine a swap will be in the works. And look at those carbon ceramic brake discs on the rear of Gurk and Damir's car. You can see, look how red hot they are. Indeed, on a lot of drives they will be absolutely glowing, I should say red, and that is the case. That shows how much brake bias our drivers are running towards the rear, and particularly in that Lancia. A little bit of a secret I was hearing down in the pit lane quite recently is the fact they run a huge amount of brake bias towards the rear on the Lancia, somewhere in the region of a brake bias of about 40, which means that's 60% rear, 40% front, whereas in, say, the Civic, it's about more towards a 50-50 balance on average, and that shows you he's really had to try and get the rear brakes to do all the work and get the car moved round. But now as they head down towards turn number 1 here, it is the case that Shepka's going to look up the inside, Damir on the outside, but the Lancia has that top end speed, so it is the case that Shepka, his teammate, has to tuck back in again. No change for the time being. As they make the way on through, we look from them to our race leader right now, Francois Schink, and it is the case the leader, well, is he being closed up to by Micah Hendricks? The answer is yes, he is, because there is Hendricks, and that last lap, Micah Hendricks a 47.94 versus Schink a 48.48. It is the case that Hendricks took a half a second out of Schink, and as they make their way through the final sector on this lap, which is the 27th lap around here under race conditions, will we see that gap come down even further, or will it be the case that the gap stabilises? Well, for Schink, he'll be hoping he can stabilise it, but I do wonder, as we see there, Hendricks almost running right over both those sausage curbs. He took one of them, not both of them. He's going to have to be careful. He won't want to collapse the suspension. It is the case that Schink pushing on all the way down towards turn number 1. And now as he heads across the line, Schink a 48.133, Hendricks a 47.8. It is the case. Another 3/10 gain for our pursuer here. Of course, our pole position driver wants to get back into the lead of this race. He'd love to bring home the win and get some major points on the board. Can he do it? Meanwhile, we can see here it is the case. Rolling the way through turns 13 and up into 15, Shepka has got past his teammate Damir. The pass was made down the Dunlop hairpin from what I'm hearing, and therefore it is the case that right now Gurk and Damir really having to try and bring the car home. But the good news for him is the fact that between him and the next driver behind, Adrian Fedorowski, there is a gap of over 20 seconds. I don't think you have to worry about that. And Fedorowski not lapping on the same pace as Damir. He's lapping at about half a second slower on average. But as they make the way down, we see Connor Acatella's just set a personal best in this race, and Acatella right now chasing after Michael McLeod. And in fact, I think Acatella here said that 10th place is not enough. He wants a P9 come the finish as he makes his way out. And we can see there in the YouTube chat, and we say hello to Gus Blondell there, who confirmed brake bias on the Lancia can go all the way down to somewhere between 33 to 34% by the end of the race. And that gives you the actual perspective from our drive, speaking from one of our Delta drivers there, in the case that they're running so much rear bias on the Elantra, and well, they're trying to get that rear to rotate as much as possible, but it does have its consequences, of course, and particularly the fact that the car's rear end will come round very aggressive under heavy braking. And right now Acatella versus McLeod here, not long to go, 9 minutes plus the final lap, and we ride on board here with Connor Acatella as he looks for one more place in order to be able to get some more points in his championship campaign. But as he rolls his way for Dunlop hairpin plate, taking plenty of apex curb there, and a bit more than what he perhaps needed as he rolls his way out of the chicane and up towards the 13th. As he heads through the right-hander here, it is the case you can see how McLeod keeping it together, but at the same time it does look as though McLeod's struggling a little bit in terms of the wear on the tyres of that Elantra as they come through turn number 15 and inwards to 16. I think this is what we're seeing more and more from our Elantra drivers typically in these longer races, is the Elantra starts off very strong, but as the race goes on it starts to fall away a little bit. And in fact you can see there how McLeod staying over to the right to break the toe, and now he'll weave back over to the left. He's allowed to do a couple of simple weaves, but too much weaving here and that will incur the curiosity of our stewards. And you can see Acatella being made to literally weave left, right and centre behind, but now it does settle down as they get closer. To be fair, McLeod cognizant of the fact that Acatella is going to get close regardless of how much weaving weaving is done, and as they make their way down to turn number 1 here, well, Acatella's going to go around the outside as McLeod defends it hard, but as they roll the way on through here and out of the corner, it is the case McLeod holds on for now, but you can imagine that Acatella will be thinking, I can have him on the laps remaining. I think McLeod will be thinking, you're going to have to try a bit harder than that, but meanwhile we must look from them to what is Travis Orr here, and if you're probably wondering who's he battling with, and if you're guessing Adrian Fedorowski, you're correct, because these two are nose to tail once again, and Travis Orr batting for P14 with Fedorowski. They were like this before the pit stops, and they're now back at it, and Travis Orr on the left of the pitch here. The Veloster driver trying to go for the move on the inside of the run down towards turn number 1, and Fedorowski bringing the car a little bit towards the centre here before returning to the outside, trying to pin Orr to a bit of a closer apex line, but in the end, in fact, giving the space back to Travis Orr, and I think Fedorowski there could have done a little bit more to perhaps force Travis Orr into a more uncomfortable run, but what Fedorowski's gone for here is the cutback run up towards turn number 3. Credit to him, he's tried it, but it hasn't worked out, because you can see there Travis Orr just able to get fully ahead by 2 attempts in the run to turn 3 and stays ahead for the time being. But I think Fedorowski here just trying to figure out a way of getting that place back and then breaking away from Travis Orr, and he hasn't quite found it so far. But a great battle between these two for what is effectively P3 in their class today here at Fuji Speedway, and as they roll the way through the turn 6 hairpin and down towards Dunlop, they run through turn 7, 8 and 9 in quick succession. Fedorowski will now be looking to come on back through the final sector, where the Honda does seem to have a small advantage over the rest of its peers here today as they roll their way on into the braking zone of 10 and under brake. Oh, goodness me! What is the case? The brakes on that Honda are strong, but they're not that strong, and it is the case that Travis Orr is given a knock to the rear, with Fedorowski immediately lifting off there and letting the racing resume before he goes hunting once again. I think Travis Orr will not be too happy about the whack to the rear, but he'll be grateful that his rival has waited. An innocent mistake, there's no doubt about that, but meanwhile, whilst they come into contact, it is the case that this battle for P9 between Michael McLeod and Con Acatella continues to go to the wire. 6 minutes left, and it is the case that Michael McLeod still holding on as we ride on board and look back from the Alpha driver here in the leading position. As they make their way through turns 4 and 5 once again, the problem of course here for Michael McLeod, you can see, in fact, look at the way he's come out of the corner, and I think this is going to be a move from Con Acatella. I was going to say those front tyres are just not offering any grip anymore. He's understeering, and immediately Con Acatella says you don't need to tell me twice, and he simply goes up the inside there into turn 6 on the brakes, carrying the momentum out the corner, and Con Acatella right now up to P9. This will be a great performance, and indeed P9 seems to be really his embodiment, if you will, in terms of his racing, because at Laguna Seca it was P9 all the way for Con Acatella. If he wasn't in P9, then it was the case something seemed to be wrong, but now he's up to P9 once again. If he's going to be nicknamed Mr. P9, well, I think that's subject to debate, but right now that 9th place suits him, and he's gained it over Michael McLeod, and McLeod definitely struggling here on those front tyres, and I do wonder whether any of our other Elantra drivers could be at risk of losing outright. And in fact, I say that, and then I look at the timing tower, and you can see here, here's the 2 race leaders of Francois Schink leading ahead of Micah Hendricks, and Hendricks has got that gap down over the last 6 laps from what was 3 seconds to 1.2 seconds, and that is a sign of, I think, where the tyre wear is going against the Elantra drivers, and indeed the other machinery available. It's really starting to build that momentum, and well, Micah Hendricks at this point will be thinking, okay, the gap now is only 1.2 seconds. I'm almost there into a really strong slipstream run down the start finish straight. And indeed, if he's within a second come the exit of turn 16, he will get a huge boost down the start finish straight in terms of the draft, and that's what Hendricks will be going for here. He has got 4 minutes left on the clock plus the final lap. That will equate to 2 more laps after this one, and as he makes his way out of the chicane and up towards turn number 13, right now Micah Hendricks just needs to play this one smart. He needs to play it gradual. He started on pole, he got back into the lead after Francois Schink's brilliant launch at the start of the race, only to lose out with a bit of a complication with regards to the back marker at turn number 13, but that complication aside, he's now back in the fight, and there's not long left, but he's got opportunities, and it's how he uses them now that will make the difference. They emerge from turn number 16, he's well within 9 tenths of Francois Schink, and Schink knows it already. You can see there a little bit of a deflection towards the middle of the road before weaving back onto what is the standard line, which is the very outside. Micah Hendricks being a bit lazy in terms of return. He doesn't want to bleed any speed off of the car down the straight. He'd rather just gradually make his way back into the toe. He won't gain as much here down the start-finish straight, but he'll gain a tenth or two, and that will be enough to get him closer under braking. And really, it's in the corners where the velocity, particularly the lower the speed of the corner, the better that the velocity is performing right now. But do keep in mind that he will be facing his own challenges with regards to tyre wear here. It's not the case that his tyres are absolutely pristine, and indeed behind them there is Robert Abrams in P3, the best part of what is 6.5 seconds behind our leaders. And it is the case that Robert Abrams here, I think, settling for third place unless there's a major incident between the top two come the end of this race, but we'll have to wait and see. But we look from Abrams back to our leaders now as they make their way through turn number 6, and Hendricks is now definitely within sight as they make their way out of the hairpin and down through 300R and up towards turn number 10. And as we ride on board here with Micah Hendricks, well, if he needed a great opportunity to really now put that pressure on, well, it is the case. This is the perfect one because they make their way through the hairpin. Look at the difference there in the lines. Hendricks just able to get the nose to point through the hairpin compared to Schink, who's really losing a lot of speed as they make their way through turn number 13. This is absolutely do or die close stuff here, and Schink is really struggling now to get the car through apex. Meanwhile, Hendricks, I think, would say if it weren't for Schink being in the way, I'd be carrying a lot more speed here. Well, he's got to try and make the move, and as he looks the inside here into turn number 16, it is the case. He goes to the move, but I think Schink being a little bit smart here and playing tactics, because now they've got the long start finish straight. And of course, what does that mean for Micah Hendricks? He won't have the toe. Meanwhile, Schink will have plenty of toe. As they make the way on down here side by side as they head onto the final lap. It is the case that we'll see Hendricks defending here from Schink. Schink has got the overspeed as they head across the line and down towards turn number 1. Now, can Hendricks outbrake Schink into turn number 1? That's the only way he's going to hold on here. He's going to go for the outbrakes, and as they make the way through into turn number 1 under braking, it's the case Hendricks makes the apex first, but Schink tries to get the cut back here. But again, you can see he's tucked in right behind Hendricks. Hendricks needs to hold on here into turn number 3. They've got a bit of traffic ahead of them in the form of stats as they make their way into Coca-Cola corner, and as they do, Hendricks holds on for the time being. But now we should see the difference. They make the way for the long right-hander at turns 4 and 5. And this should be where Francois Schink really starts to feel the pain on the front tyres compared to Hendricks. And look at that, you could see he's understeering there in the dirty area as well. Hendricks is Veloster. And as they come through the hairpin at turn 6 and 7, it is the case now Hendricks gets a good run. Schink behind him also gets a good run. They head down towards turn number 10, charging on through the double right section of turns 8 and 9, through 300R and down towards the Dunlop hairpin. Meanwhile, elsewhere on circuit, I can tell you that Bauer and Lauzon are battling for P7, but we're staying here with a battle for the lead. It's all going to come down to the final section, the run to the line, as Hendricks here gets a good run through the chicane, through the hairpin as well, and now heading up towards the 13th. And as he does, we ride on board the gearbox here of Hendricks, who right now just needs to nail these apexes. If he nails them, he will be clear in the run down the start finish straight. They head up into next bend here at turn number 15, and as they do, you could see how Schink is having to really change his approach to corners. He's going for those late apexes, and as they head up towards turn number 16, it's one more corner and then a drag race to the line. The timer hits an hour. It's the case the checker flag awaits. Will it be Hendricks? Will it be Schink? Well, Hendricks started the straight here with 4/10 of a second advantage, and now it's all about getting to the line. I think he's done enough here as he heads on down. It's going to be very close, but as they make the way to the timeline, it is Micah Hendricks who takes the win in the end by 2/10 ahead of Francois Schink here at Fuji Speedway. A brilliant battle between the two of them to the line. It will be Robert Abrams who comes home on the third step of the podium, and in Logan Mckinsey in a lonely P4, but a well-earned one ahead of Justin Rhodes, who will complete the top 5 here as he makes his way to the timeline in front of a packed stadium crowd. And as he makes his way across the line, it's then Jerome Bagillo's P6 for Beaver Buzz ahead of David Bauer, who beats John Lauzon to the finish line. P7 for Bauer, P8 for Lauzon, and then it will be Connor Acatella here who continues to build that championship momentum. He will come across the line P9, but he also come across the line our winner in the Delta class here today. A brilliant drive from Connor Acatella with that undercut very on in the race, earning him that win. And Michael McLeod comes home in P10, completing the top 10 ahead of Auguste Blondel here in P11 as he comes to the timeline. A great drive from Blondel as well, and to be fair, to come all the way up to P11, P2 in class is is testament to his abilities. And then Matt Shepka in P12, followed by Gurkan Demir. Talk Steer Racing having a very difficult day here at Fuji, but we've still got plenty to go in terms of drivers to make the way to the timeline. And that is Travis Hoare first as he makes his way out of the final corner. It is the case of number 67 driver making his way on down. But meanwhile, I am hearing that Wiley Cox has found his way past Adrian Fedorowski right at the end. But in the battle for P3 in the Delta class, it will be Travis Hoare who finishes in that P3 position, P14 overall, as he crosses the line ahead of Wiley Cox in P4, who has just beaten Adrian Fedorowski to the line. In fact, Fedorowski has run out of fuel, which means Daniel Sedino will come across the line P16, and that is very unfortunate for Fedorowski. Sedino P16, and then Adrian Fedorowski, the last of our lead lap finishers in that P17 position, with Eric Statzer and Brandon Bears completing the finishing positions on circuit P18, P19. As we see here, Fedorowski creep into the line. He takes the checkered flag, albeit out of fuel. Let's take a look at those race results, ladies and gentlemen, subject to stewards' inquiries, of course. When in the end, as we do look to the overall race results here today, it is the case that we can see Micah Hendricks in the end taking that win in a very dramatic last-minute dash to the finish line ahead of Francois Schenk, the privateer, just beating the Beaver Buzz driver by 2 attempts when all was said and done. Robert Abrams coming home in P3, really completing the podium there, and then best of the rest in P4. Logan Mckinsey ahead of Justin Rhodes P5, Jerome Bajulaz P6, David Bauer P7, John Nelson P8, and then Connor Acatella taking the Delta class win with P9 overall, ahead of Michael McLeod completing the top 10. August Blondell P11, Matt Shepka in P12, Gurkan Demir P13, and then Travis Hoare and Wiley Cox completing the top 15. Daniel Sedino P16 ahead of Adrian Fedorowski and Eric Statzer. And as we look further down the order outside of the top 18, Brandon Veres, the last of our finishers on circuit here today, P19 after starting from the pit lane. Great work from Brandon Veres to bring it to the finish line. And then Jesse Badass, unfortunately that retirement, 8 laps from the end. It is the case finishing P20 as classified. James Carr coming home P21, and I do believe, given the fact the retirement was 14 laps from the end, he will be classified and pick up points. And it will be the case that Jorge Zuniga there coming home in what was P22, but finishing at 21 laps down. He will not be classified in picking up points, nor Aaron Lahr P23, nor Daniel Smith or Spencer Cockayne, and particularly Spencer Cockayne unable to take to the grid due to technical issues and not able to get out on circuit. Very unfortunate for the Blue Flag Motorsports driver. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, I know the big question you may be asking at the moment is, well, how does that affect the championship standings? Well, let's take you through how that has changed the complexion of the standings. It is the case, if we look in the Drivers' Championship firstly, from first to 10th, Robert Abrams continues to lead, but now his advantage after finishing third today has been cut to only 2 points ahead of Francois Schenk in P2. Logan Mckinsey has moved up to P3. He's gained 3 places after what was a brilliant and well-earned P4 finish here today. 134 points. He's only 2 points clear of John Lauzon in P4 now, and then David Bauer a little bit further back in P5, but gaining 3 places of his own in the championship, now up to 118 points, 4 ahead of Jerome Bajulaz, and Jerome Bajulaz in return the best part of what is 8 ahead of Matthew Shepka. And Justin Rhodes in P8 there on 104 points, 1 point clear of James Carr and a further 3 points clear of Gurkan Demir. And that completes your top 10. And then outside the top 10, running in P11 at the moment, will be none other than our Delta class leader, who in his rookie season as well, doing very well so far and showing his pace and his strengths. And that is Connor Acatella there, currently on 98 points, indeed doing very well. And he is 5 points ahead of the rookie who's joined us of Micah Hendricks. And Micah Hendricks definitely showing what he's worth in terms of those performances with that win today, getting him a lot of points on the board and now up to what is that P12 position. Daniel Smith, with a difficult day, it drops down to what is P13, we should say, on 89 points after that early retirement. And then Wiley Cox and Michael McLeod completing the top 15. August Blondell there continues on his charge, now 51 points to his name, but behind Michael McLeod based on result countback in P16. Travis Hoare, Adrian Fedorowski, Eric Statzer, and Daniel Sedino completing the top 20. And then outside the top 20, but not to be forgotten about, Jonathan Stroll in P21, not attending today and losing 6 positions. Corey Fluke, the same, not in attendance. And indeed, both our Audi drivers are Fluke and Scotty Lund are not in attendance today. We hope to see them back at Alton Park in a week's time. As it is the case, we do love to see the Audis battling it out, but they're P22 and P23. Then Aaron Lahr, with a very difficult day, drops down to P24 and 13 points. Dom Savio in P25 stays where he is, with Jesse Bodas P26. Joint 11 points with Brandon Vares, albeit ahead based on result countback. Brandon Vares coming home today and bringing home some points, which means he's now up to P27. Ahead of Sean Gurd, and then Spencer Cockayne and Jorge Zuniga complete the standings there, P21 through to P30. Meanwhile, in the Teams Championship, how does the complexion change? Well, it is the case. There's no change in terms of where our teams are placed. The only difference is look at how the gaps are coming together right at the top. Beaver Buzz now only leading by 2 points ahead of Yellow Flag Motorsports. And then we do have a gulf of what is 30 points to Breakfast for Dinner. But do not count out Breakfast for Dinner. It is the case that they are putting in some very strong performances and are looking to get into that fight for the lead. Torque Steer Racing dropping away a little bit, now on 228 points. In a bit of a no man's land between Breakfast for Dinner and Blue Flag Motorsports. But hopefully they'll have better fortune at Alton Park, with Blue Flag Motorsports on 134 points in P5. And then QZ Motorsports A, or QZ Motorsports has been simplified to, on 32 points, and Gasparilla Motorsport on 6 points, last but not least in the Teams Championship standings. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we've got time for today. And all we can say is thank you very much for watching. And if you did enjoy the show today, if you enjoyed the championship and want to know more about the Alpha Touring Challenge in terms of perhaps how you can take part, alternatively, just know more about what we do at ATC, then why not check out our official website, that is alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com. Alternatively, if you're more Discord inclined, why not go to our official Discord and join today, and you can see the invite link available on screen there. But now it is the case, our drivers will be packing up their bags, and indeed their pit crews will be packing up their bags, because it is a long haul flight from Japan to the United Kingdom, and in particular to Alton Park for round number 4. And whilst the racing action will be happening on Monday the 1st of August, it is the case we'll be bringing it all of you, we will be bringing all the racing action to you, we should say, as if it were live on Friday the 5th of August. You won't want to miss it. If Alton Park is known for anything, it is known to be one of the fundamental circuits on a touring car calendar. If you don't know what I'm on about, check out British Touring Car Championship. It is the case the BTCC runs at Alton Park every year, and it's an absolute spectacle. And given how strong the racing we have seen in the Alpha Touring Challenges, and I would argue this is the closest you'll get on iRacing to the equivalent of BTCC, you will not want to miss seeing all of our drivers attack the Alton Park circuits. It is the case, it's tight, it's narrow, there's going to be contact, but we love it, and we love to see how it will all go down, and that will all come in a week's time. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we have been the Alpha Touring Challenge. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh. And until next time, have a great weekend ahead. Remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.